So we are going to turn paragraphs into an essay, and you can see here I've got two topic sentences and the rest of the paragraph I just have garbledy-gook because what we're really going to be working with here are the topic sentences. You need to have a thesis that is going to match both of those topic sentences, because what a thesis does is it tells you what is the entire paper going to be about. So your thesis is going to have to include both that she's rude and that she is then risking her life to save others. But your thesis should also always match the prompt. So whatever it is that you've been asked to write about, your thesis should reflect that. Now, this student is really working off of the prompt is to explain how Marguerite is a dynamic character. And so I am going to have to, in my thesis, include the word dynamic. So let's take a look at what a thesis actually looks like. So here you can see the thesis, and that's going to be the one sentence that sets up the entire paper. I have a reference to what the prompt is, but then I also need to have references to the two body paragraphs. So rude person shows up as rude, and risks her own life to save others shows up as she'll do anything to save others. Now, here is the trick. If your body paragraphs are in this order, 1 and then 2, your thesis has to be in this order, 1 and then 2. No exceptions. But now that we have our thesis in, we want to add a transition onto the front of our second body paragraph. Now, our first body paragraph, it comes right after the thesis, and so it's really closely linked. But in your second body paragraph, you want to make a reference to the previous paragraph and the topic before you go into that new paragraph. She risks her life to save others. Because I have a strong contrast here, I'm going to use a word that indicates contrast. So even though I'm going to make a reference back to that previous paragraph, even though she started rude, Marguerite later risks her own life to save others because she is dynamic. So let's take a look at the two different topic sentences that we've got going on here. Our first topic sentence simply tells me the character and gives me the topic. We're going to be doing a whole paragraph about rude. My second body paragraph, it has to be a little bit more complicated. I am going to have this transition that references to the previous paragraph. It's called a bridge transition. I am then going to have a reference back to the prompt. So I can still see that basic, here's the character, here's the trait right in the middle, but that second body paragraph, the topic sentence has got to get a little bit more complex. So let's take a look using a different set of paragraphs and a different prompt.
I asked her why. She said that she needed help, but when she raised her hand, no one came. But the thing is, I know my kid, and I know when she raised her hand, it was like this. So I needed to help her so she could be more independent. I give her the same foods every day. She knows exactly what to expect, and there's not going to be any added stress for food choices. Now, the last time I talked about what my daughter ate for lunch, I got a lot.
Here we have two new paragraphs, and this person chose to work on the prompt that said, you know, what's the character traits that you see with Marguerite? And so you have that others chose to follow Marguerite and that Marguerite does what she believes right. Although I don't know how I quite managed to highlight the wrong thing there, but I'll go and put the highlighter on the correct part. So now that I have these two body paragraphs, I have to decide what is it that holds these two things together. Well, the character trait or the description of Marguerite that really captures both of those. If other people follow you and you always do what you believe is right, well, that probably means that you're a leader. And so these two paragraphs are both going to fit under Marguerite is a leader. So let's create that thesis. Since that thesis will capture both body paragraphs, that's what we need to have. So now I have my thesis. Marguerite is best described as a leader. So the prompt sort of asks how it's best to describe her. So you have that reference to the prompt, and then the answer to the prompt. The thing that the whole paragraph is going to be about is that she's a leader. So our last paper was all about she's dynamic. This one is all about she's a leader. And then I can see again, I need to have the 1, 2. This says that reason 1 is others follow her. Reason 2 is she does what she believes is right. 1, follow her. 2, believes that she does what she believes is right. I love that those are in order, but having them match so exactly feels a little repetitive. It's almost like you can't come up with other words. There's a little thing called a thesaurus. Just go search for thesaurus on Google, and let's see if we can't come up with some other words that would work in here. Okay, the second one, it'd be really easy to change believes right to thinks is ethical, what she thinks is ethical. The first one, that others follow her, well, it might be that others obey her. It might be that others listen to her. It would really depend on what the specific evidence says. And because I didn't copy the student's entire paragraph, I don't actually remember. But I would probably go with one of these before I would just repeat the exact words, follow Marguerite and does what she believes right. So I now have a good solid thesis, and the thesis tells me what the entire paragraph is about. It links to the prompt, and that prompt was, what is she like? She's a leader. And it gives me the links to the 2 body paragraphs, and those 2 body paragraphs are linked in order. So number 1 is my first body paragraph. Number 2 is my second body paragraph. So we seem to have a kind of a nice setup going here. So let's see if we can get our transitions in there. Now, in this case, these 2 paragraphs are pretty similar. So I'm going to use a transition that suggests that we have similarities. So just like Marguerite is a leader, and you see how, just like Marguerite inspires others to follow. And now you can see I've done that thing where I make a reference to the previous paragraph. So just like Marguerite inspires others to follow her, Marguerite also does what she believes right, which is a huge part of leadership. And so you can see I again have this back half where I'm going back and making reference to that thesis statement. And so both of these, that second topic sentence does a lot of shifting so that you can pull in that prompt and so that you can make that transition back to the previous paragraph. So go and do that, because now we're going to talk about how to create an introduction. So the first thing you can do for an introduction, well, the first thing you have to have in every introduction is a hook, something that's going to grab the reader's attention. And one of the best ways to create a hook is to give background information, to talk about the historical time period or the history of the book, when the book was written, who wrote the book, but you can give some interesting tidbits of information from the background. And that would work for either of these 2 particular introductions. So I can go and I can research when the Scarlet Pimpernel was published, or I could research, Baroness Orzcy, who wrote it. Now, you have to come up with your own facts. You can't use the ones I'm about to show you, but I do want to give you a sample of how you would do this kind of introduction. So here I have pulled a few interesting facts that a reader may go, oh, that's interesting. The Scarlet Pimpernel was originally written as a play and was performed by the Nottingham Theatre Royal in 1903. Theatre critics didn't like it, but audiences did. It became popular, and within 2 years of the play being first performed, Orzcy had turned it into a novel. So that is what is called my hook. And the hook, or sometimes teachers will call it an attention grabber, is what initially gets the audience's attention and says to them, hey, I've got something interesting here to say, so that your readers will listen to you. The problem becomes, how do you go from the hook to the thesis? Because if we just go from the last word in our hook straight to our thesis, it's going to sound very awkward and choppy, and it doesn't sound like it goes together. So if I start here, it became popular, and within 2 years of the play first being performed, Orzcy had turned it into a novel. Marguerite is a dynamic character because she starts off rude, but by the end she'll do anything to save others. It's like, whoa, you had such a fast change of subject there that it doesn't feel like it goes together. And so between these two, what you need is called a bridge. And a bridge is a special type of transition. You actually already did a bridge, and you did it in your topic sentence, the second one, in order to bridge from one paragraph to another. But now we're going to do a bridge, and that simply means we're going to take keywords from the top and keywords from the bottom, the thesis here, and we're going to put them together into one sentence. And because we're pulling those ideas together, it will make it flow together. So step number one, I need to identify what are the main ideas in the introduction. Well, it was written as a play. It was performed. The theater critics didn't like it. Audiences did. It became popular. And it was turned into a novel. All of those are the main idea words from the top. Well, what are the main idea words from my thesis? Dynamic character. Marguerite. I'm not really going to call my links to my body paragraphs main ideas, because if I link to one of them but not the other, that's going to feel weird. I kind of think of these as the children. And you have to treat your children equally, or else everything feels lopsided and the whole family goes weird. So I'm going to keep these two as my main idea. Now, how do I create a bridge? It's very simple. Any sentence that contains both words from the top and words from the bottom will pull that together. So I could say something like, because audiences loved Marguerite, she helped make this book popular in part because she is a dynamic character. Ding, that's a bridge. That's all it takes. Let's try it again. This play turned novel became popular in part because of one character named Marguerite. Bang, that's a bridge. Okay, let's try it again. The popularity of this novel and play relies partially on the dynamic character of Marguerite. Bang, that's a bridge. Every single one of those would be a correct transition or bridge. And that's because it takes a word or two from the top and it puts it in the same sentence as a word or two from the bottom. So let's take a look at the bridge in place. And here you can see the bridge. Now, how do I know it's a bridge? Because I have the word popularity, which ties me to the top. I have play and novel, both of which take me up to the top. We've got play and we've got novel. But I also have Marguerite, which takes me down to the bottom, the thesis. I have character, which comes straight out of the thesis. And so in this case, I've got 3 words that link me to the top, my hook, and I have 2 words that link me down to the thesis. And those words are all in one sentence. And that makes it a bridge so that it flows from one concept to the next without feeling like you have any sudden breaks. So if I read it out loud, you'll hear it. Baroness Orzcy was originally written as a... oh my heavens. How did that get changed? So, sorry about that. The Scarlet Pimpernel was originally written as a play and was performed by the Nottingham Theatre Royal in 1903. Theatre critics didn't like it, but audiences did. It became popular, and within 2 years of the play first being performed, Orzcy had turned it into a novel. The popularity of this play and novel depends largely on the power of Marguerite as a character. Marguerite is a dynamic character because she starts rude, but by the end, she will do anything to save others. And so that is an introduction. Our conclusion is going to be even easier. And here I have a conclusion. While starting rude, Marguerite did end up one of the strongest characters. This is a reference to body paragraph 1 and body paragraph 2. And then, of course, we have our dynamic character. So what this means is you need to restate the thesis. Do not put it in the same words. You want to put it in new phrasing, but you do want to keep the same basic idea. More than any of the other characters, she has helped drive the popularity of this novel. That is going to be a reference to our hook. So the hook talked about the play and the book being popular, and so you need to go back to whatever is in that opening line of your intro. And finally, the last thing you're going to have, perhaps those that complain that classic literature is boring should read the story of this interesting woman, and that is going to be a reference to real life. Pull it out and talk about why this essay or why this book is important to someone in real life. So that's the entire conclusion. 3 parts. Restate the thesis, reference to the hook, and make a connection to real life. That's it. Now you have an entire essay. So let's try taking our second pair of mock-up body paragraphs and let's see if we can repeat it again using a different type of hook. So this time we have Marguerite is best described as a leader because others listen to her and because she does what she thinks is ethical. We've already gone over why that thesis works with these 2 topic sentences, but maybe I don't want to give background information. Maybe I have got the absolute perfect quote that really captures Marguerite. However, I have not found a place in my body paragraphs to put that quote. It just has not matched with the arguments I've made. Well, if that quote really captures Marguerite, I can actually create a formal quote for my introduction and use it as my hook. So I create a formal quote, and what a formal quote means is that instead of embedding a little tiny bit of quote, instead I'm going to have a formal introduction, someone once said, and I'm then going to have a full sentence. Money and titles may be hereditary, but brains are not. So it's sort of the opposite of doing an embedded quote where you've got little tiny bits and pieces. Once I have that embedded quote, I then need to explain what exactly that means and what's going on at this point. So what I have now is an explanation of what that quote really means. She is suggesting that a person should not be judged by qualities like wealth or whether a person is royalty, because what really matters is a person's intelligence. How in the world does that connect to leadership? Well, we're going to make it connect to leadership by creating a bridge sentence. And we're going to create that bridge exactly the way we did it before. Although this time we have to keep in mind that we have to explain how the quote relates to leadership a little bit better. So it may be a little bit trickier this time, and it always is with a quote. But we start by identifying the main idea words in the quote itself, not in the explanation. And then identifying the main idea words in the thesis. And again, I'm not going to pull in those words that link to the body paragraphs because I just want the main idea from the thesis itself. And now I am going to simply create one bridge sentence that links words from the top and words from the bottom. Marguerite does not have respect for titles and money because she understands that these do not make a person a leader. Bang, that's it. That is your bridge. Marguerite defines leadership as a quality of intelligence, not as one of titles. Bang. That is your bridge right there. So in other words, stop overcomplicating bridge. Take a couple words from the top, a couple of words from the bottom, link them together into one paragraph, and you're good. So let's get our bridge in place. And bam, there's your bridge. So now we have our entire introduction, although please indent. I'm a horrible teacher for not indenting this. So now we have our entire introduction. This time our hook consists of a quote plus an explanation. We have our bridge, and then we have our thesis. And if you read it together, it all fits together. Marguerite Blakeney once said, "Money and titles may be hereditary, but brains are not." She is suggesting that a person should not be judged by the qualities like wealth or whether a person is royalty, because what really matters is a person's intelligence. According to Marguerite, leadership comes from intelligence, not wealth or titles. Marguerite is best described as a leader because others listen to her, and she does what she thinks is ethical. So every single sentence connects to the next one, and we don't have any jarring jumps from one topic to another. I now need to put in my conclusion. Do y'all remember what I should do with my three-part conclusion? I should start by referencing my thesis. Make a reference back to the thesis. After that, you want to connect back to the hook. And in this case, we're going to make a reference back to the quote itself without repeating the quote. And finally, we want to broaden it out to talk about real life. Okay, we start by going back to that thesis and having those traits in the same order. By getting others to follow her, that's my first body paragraph. And holding firm to her own beliefs, that's the second body paragraph. Marguerite establishes herself as a leader, that's my main trait in the thesis. So that's a reference back to thesis. I should now have a connection to the hook. She shows that money and titles don't really matter at all. Those are taken right straight out of the quote. So we have that opening hook being referenced back to. Characters like Marguerite can teach readers how to become better leaders for themselves. So now we're getting out into the real world. The world would certainly be better if more women and even men followed Marguerite's example. Now, if you notice here, you don't just have one sentence, real world connection. Here, you've got two sentences. And here's what you need to know about the real world connection. There's no set number of sentences. Yes, it might be one sentence. Sometimes that's going to be seen as being a little short, somebody that's a student that's sort of trying to get it over with quickly. But a lot of times the real world connection can go up into 2 or 3 sentences long, and that's perfectly acceptable. This is where you get to share your ideas and have your voice. But what you need to make sure you avoid are words like I, me, my, you, your. All of these words are big no-nos. So as you are making that real world connection, make sure you're focusing on readers, not you.